Hi, I'm Chef Brendan McDermott, culinary instructor at the Institute of Culinary Education in New York City. And today we're going to talk about knives, because whether you're a professional or you're an amateur, this is the base of everything we do. So I've been teaching culinary school for about the past 8 years with a main focus on knife skills. I've been in restaurants since I was about 16 years old, and on my free time I did a lot of martial arts with some weapon training. So understanding knives has really become something that's really become more of a passion. So let's start talking about knives, kind of understand what we're getting into here, and really break down the 4 basic knives that we really need to have in the house. Because whenever you go out and buy knives, it can be kind of a bombardment. There's a whole wall of knives, a lot of different stuff going on. You have German, French, American, Chinese, Japanese, a whole array of knives, and it's a little too much sometimes. So let's start talking about knives and really understand what we really need to have in the house. So as you can see, what I have here today is a lot of different kinds, and we have different makes, different kinds of steels. So let's really understand what we're dealing with. For the most part, what we really need to have in the house is a chef knife. And they can range anywhere from 6 to even 12-inch knives. So for most of us, we'll kind of go into a store to buy a knife and we see that nice 8-inch chef knife or a 9. And we're like, that's a little, that's not really where I'm going. I see this one on TV a lot. I like this Santoku. And we tend to go for the smaller knife. Now the Santoku is not a chef knife. It never has been and never will be, but it's more of a vegetable knife. And Santoku in Japanese means 3 purposes, 3 uses. So basically small things like herbs, vegetables, small fruits, stuff like that. Sure, you can use it on other things, but when you're dealing with a small knife, you end up having to do more work when you start getting into bigger items. So a lot of professionals tend to go for the bigger knife. Now something here like this Wusthof 9-inch, very wonderful knife. I love playing with this one. It's got some nice weight to it and got a lot of length. Now a lot of the Japanese knives, same thing. They may be cut a little different, a little thinner, a little lighter, but the makes of the steels can really kind of make up for weight or length and stuff like that. But we tend to go for the bigger knife. Now, some of the things that trip us up too is whether we want to buy stainless steel or carbon. And it's really kind of PC or Mac, Chevy or Ford, whatever you really like. They both have their pluses and their minuses. So just kind of understanding what you want to get into is totally up to you. Most of the knives that we see are stainless steel because they don't rust out, they don't look bad, but they don't really hold their edge as long as a carbon steel may. But carbon steel sometimes require a little bit more work, and 1 or 2 uses, you start getting a lot of oxidization and stuff on it, and a lot of people don't like the way that looks. So the chef knife, though, is going to take care of pretty much, no matter what you buy, 99% of what we do on a daily basis. So the chef knife is really the key. And once you understand the chef knife, all the other ones start falling into place. Another chef knife that we have in here is a Chinese chef knife. Very different, at first glance, but it really does have a lot of the same role that we need to have on the chef knife. So another one that's out there, probably not as common, but pretty awesome to have around. The next knife that we need to have in the house is a serrated. And now a lot of us have something that looks a little bit like this. This is actually considered a bread knife, right? We nicknamed it the bread knife. We use it on bread. But serrated knives are so much more versatile than that. What I actually like to use is something known as a serrated utility knife. Some companies like Wusthof actually call them a confectioner's knife. They call them different names, but you can find them. And the nice thing about the serrated utility knife is that it actually is shaped a little bit more like a chef knife. It has a little bit of a heel. It has a little bit of a belly. Whereas the bread knife is very flat, very straight. So when you go, and doesn't have much of a heel, so when you go to finish your cut, a lot of the blade never even touches. So you end up having to do more work with something like this. Whereas when you're dealing with something like a serrated utility knife, you have a little bit more roll. So this is wonderful for bread, but it's also now great for cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, pineapple, bell peppers, tomatoes, jalapenos, anything with tougher waxy skins. This is what gets you in there. So if you've ever had trouble with skinning butternut squash, this is the key. This is the one. So that's the second knife you really want to have in the house. The third knife you want to have in the house is a paring knife. And paring knives are good for all the little things, shallots, garlic, strawberries, anything that requires a little detail or work. So maybe getting into garlic, you may not want to start off with your chef knife. So that's what that one's for, something that requires just a little bit more little bit more work without getting into something so scary. And these 3 knives pretty much take care of everything we do on a daily basis. Now, I know sometimes you'll see chefs and we're walking around with bags with like 17 knives in them because we're awesome and we can. But when it comes down to it and doing 200 dinners on a Friday night, most of us just use these 2. That's pretty much it. A lot of us can get away with using just the chef knife. Now, if you have some bread or butternut squash on your station, you might bring in a serrated and really take care of just about everything. Now, if you like to do a little bit of butchering, maybe around the holidays you get stuck doing turkey at Thanksgiving, there's a 4th knife that you want to have in the house, and that's called a boning knife. And boning knives come in a couple different shapes and designs, like chef knives or anything else. And the main difference between a lot of your boning knives, whether they have a belly or they're flat and straight, is that there are 2 different kinds. One is known as a fillet knife, which is actually very flexible, and that flexibility can give you leeway more for fish and chicken. The other ones tend to be a little stiffer, not as flexible, and these are more used for bigger things, maybe getting into pig or lamb, stuff like that. And having been a butcher for 1.5 years, I actually use this one to break down everything from fresh little anchovies to over 180-pound sides of pig. As long as I don't have to go through a bone, this is pretty much the only knife that I need. So when it really comes down to it, with all the different knives that are out there, all you really need to get started, and even as a professional, are mainly just these 4. For most of us, we can get away with these 3 and really cover everything we're ever going to do. So just remember, these can be heirlooms. If you take care of your knives, you can hand these down pretty much through generation to generation. With proper storage and really taking care of them, they can really last a long time. So if you have a butcher block, wonderful. Knives can slide right into them, taken care of. If you have a magnetic strip, just make sure that the teeth never touch the magnetic strip. You can drop it safely to the side or maybe around from the spine. And if you don't really have a lot of space or stuff like that, you can always just get a quick little plastic or wood sheath where the knife slides right in. Making sure that the teeth are totally taken care of, your knife is going to last you forever. So in the next lesson, we're going to go over the 4 basic cuts, go over some hand placement and safety. So let's have some fun and play with knives. You're having a dinner party, you got some friends over, you're prepping, and you just realize your knives are not cutting like they should. You don't have a honing rod on you, you haven't made that investment, so what you can do is actually grab a plate or a coffee mug. Anything that's got that unglazed porcelain on the bottom, ceramic is going to be a natural sharpener. So you can just take your knife, make sure you get that angle down, and make sure you get the whole blade. Do that a couple times on each side, and you should notice your knife coming right back. Dinner served.